All
Amen.
right, I believe we are live. Uh, Dawn Cappelli, so great to have you here on this new feature that I've been doing for my Cyber Intelligence Weekly newsletter. Um, as you've probably seen, I've been talking to some great leading industry professionals and CISOs and former CISOs about their journey and their leadership styles and things they've learned along the way. And I was super excited to hear that you'd be willing to be part of this. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And do you mind starting off by introducing yourself and giving our listeners a little bit of background about you?
Sure. So I'm Dawn Cappelli, and I currently am working at Dragos, which is an industrial cybersecurity company. But I started my career programming nuclear power plants at Westinghouse. From there, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, still as a software engineer. And then I became interested in cybersecurity, and CERT, the very first cybersecurity organization in the world, was right there at Carnegie Mellon. So I thought, oh, I think I'll try to get a job there. Got a job there, and my first job was working with the Secret Service on how to protect national special security events from cyber incidents. And so we can get into that more, but it totally changed my life. It unwoke a passion in me for security, and so that guided
Amazing.
to my career. Ended up working on insider threats. So, um, boy, this is going to end up being a long story, Dan. Do you want me to just get into it?
Yeah, let's go. I'm ready for it. I got my water. I'm gonna take a swig.
Okay. So I started at CERT in 2001, August
Okay.
1st, 2001,
Yep.
and I knew nothing about cybersecurity. So I thought, yeah, they told me you're going to be project manager for this new project we just got with the Secret Service. You're going to help protect national special events from cyber events, because the Secret Service at that point was gates, guards, guns. It was all physical protection. And they
Sure.
realized, yeah, we probably ought to start thinking about cyber. So
Absolutely.
that I was the project manager for that. And I just told
Wow.
everybody, I don't know how I got this job. I know nothing about security. And I get to go with the Secret Service to the Olympics, because that was our first event we had to
Un
protect. Salt Lake City.
Unbelievable.
I know. So I thought, this is the coolest job in the world. I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. And then 1 month later, 9/11 happened.
Oh my God.
And suddenly that fun, cool job was very serious, because the intelligence community really thought the Olympics would be the next target, because they were in February of 2002. So suddenly that cool, fun job just terrified me. I know nothing about cybersecurity.
That was Salt Lake City, right? 2002.
Exactly. So we went on our first advance to Salt Lake City and met with the International Olympic Committee. And they said, don't worry, Dawn, you're the project manager. You don't need to know anything about security. And we'll have lots of technical people to do the work.
Sure.
So we're meeting with the Olympic Committee, and they're poring over network diagrams and trying to figure out how could the terrorists hack into the network and bring down the Olympics or cause harm. And someone just happened to say, so have you had any like systems administrators or network administrators that left on bad terms and already know how to get into the network? And they said, let us go get you a list. And they came back with a list of 20 people. And this is the International Olympic Committee. So there are people on there from the Middle East, which is where the terrorists came from. And so suddenly the Secret Service said, whoa, I think we need to split into two teams. We need an insider threat team and an external threat team. And
Wow.
I thought, okay, I know nothing about security, but I do understand people. And so I said, I'll take the insider threat team. So I took that team and they said, okay, so what are you going to do? And I'm thinking, heck if I know.
Yeah,
But I thought, well, let's try and learn from attacks that have actually happened in the past. Because
absolutely.
at that time, insider threat, the basic thought was there's nothing you can do about it. It's an insider. They have access, they have the ability. If they want to do something bad, they're going to do it. You won't be
Yeah,
able to stop them.
sure.
So um, I took the insider threat team and the Secret Service gathered all of their insider threat cases they had. They went to the FBI, got us all of their cases that they had, and we just went through them and looked at each one and said, could this happen? How could we prevent it? How could we detect it? And that's how we prepared for the Olympics. And it worked. I mean, basically, there were no attacks on the Olympics. And then they said, I think we ought to continue down this path. So we started an insider threat study that we did with the behavioral psychologists from the Secret Service. So it was a very neat, groundbreaking study. We have psychologists and technologists looking at these insider threat cases and looking at who did it, why, when, how, and what could have been done to prevent or detect it.
Sure.
And so we ended up, that's what I did for the next 12 years of my life till 2013. Um, it was very successful because when we cataloged all of those cases in a database and then did empirical analysis on it, and we created models based on the data, and I have to say it kind of made the insider threat field what it is today, because for the first time we could say, oh, yes, there is something you can do about it, because we know who does it and why and when and how, and we know what to do to stop it. So I ended up at CERT, being the founder and the director of the CERT Insider Threat Center. We went on to do a lot more work in insider threat with the government. A lot of it was with the intelligence community, so I can't talk about that work.
Yep.
Um, and with the private sector. So it was really, really a fun and rewarding 13 years.
That is truly amazing. And isn't that what set the foundation for the whole, the SCI and CERT's like insider threat management program? And I mean, they've basically written the standard too, right? On how to mitigate third or insider, threats.
Yes, we wrote a book on insider threat. And so, yeah, we worked with the National Insider Threat Center when the government formed that. And
Yep.
we helped to stand it up, and we helped to kind of come up with those standards for what should an insider threat program look like. So,
Unbelievable.
yeah, it was a lot of fun, really rewarding. And then the CISO of Rockwell came along, Rockwell Automation. Rockwell creates industrial control systems.
Yep. Great
And
company.
so the CISO came to see me and recruited me to go to Rockwell and build an insider risk program. And at that point in time, the only companies that really had insider risk programs were finance, because you had to protect the credit card
The
data
money.
from
Yeah.
the administrators,
Right.
and defense contractors because of spies.
Yep.
And so that was it. Like companies like Rockwell didn't have insider threat programs. So I went to Rockwell and created we called it insider risk. Um, and so created our insider risk program. And again, it was like really fun. I found that I love breaking new ground. I love tackling some problem that has never been done before. And so it was terrifying though, like to leave Carnegie Mellon where I told everyone what to do and to actually go do it.
Right.
But it's scary, but it worked. We caught a lot of insider threats, including a senior embedded firmware engineer from China who stole all of our source code. But we
Wow.
caught him so fast that he wasn't able to do anything with it. He couldn't transfer it to anyone because we got him
Unbelievable.
fast. Um, so that was an experience. Testified at my first trial, and that was the most intimidating thing I've ever done in my life.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
And then our CISO retired, or not retired, went to a new job. And he told Rockwell, so I told them, "You're my successor." And I said, "I don't want to be a CISO. I love my job. I want to
Yeah.
be a CISO. I don't know anything about being a CISO."
Yeah.
And, it was very CISO again. It was very undefined at that
Sure.
point. This was 2016, and the NIST CSF was pretty new. And so
Yeah,
I
just not a lot of CISOs in the world 10 years ago, right? Like,
Right, right. So I met with our general counsel and I said, "I don't really want to be the CISO, but I did some research for you. And here's a one pager on what I think the CISO position should look like. And so you can
nice.
put this in the job description if you want." And he said, "Hey, I like that. Can you turn that into 3 pages?" And so I did. I came back a week later and turned it into 3 pages with more detail. And I went through it. And he said, "You sound pretty excited about this." And I think I am. And he said, "You talked yourself into a job, didn't you?"
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. So that's how I became CISO. And then after we created our IT security strategy, we did that from like April till January. Then I said, "So who's responsible for our manufacturing plants?" And they said, "Oh, you are. But don't worry, we have a firewall in every plant." I thought, well, somehow that doesn't sound sufficient to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And OT cybersecurity wasn't a thing back then.
Nope. Nope.
In electric, in oil and gas, because they had attacks, but that was really it. So again, I got the chance to break new ground and pulled together CISOs from Rockwell customers, and we all kind of worked together. I called it our OT CISO group, and we kind of all shared ideas on how to do this. So
Yeah.
I did that until 2022, and then I retired for 2 months, and then I couldn't resist.
That's like a lifetime for you. Yeah.
It was. It was right when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I'm in Hawaii on my retirement trip saying, "I need to do something. What am I
Yeah.
doing in Hawaii?"
On the sidelines. Yep.
Yeah. So Dragos offered me my dream job, which was they wanted me to build OT CERT, which provides free resources for small and medium organizations that have OT environments, operational technology,
Yeah.
industrial. And so I did. I just went there. I worked part time. I watched my grandkids the other part time and built OT CERT. And so right now we have 75 free resources. We're in 73 different countries, 3,200 members. And it's just a dream job. I call myself the security fairy godmother. I just get to give away things for free.
I mean, talk about no better person to have that role. I mean, it seems like it was just like perfect timing, perfect situation for you. Um,
Yes.
and I also love the story about how you kind of designed the perfect role for you prior to that at Rockwell, and working your way from just the insider risk sort of area to the full scope CISO. Um,
Amen.
All started by some great opportunities born out of the great city of Pittsburgh. So
Yes. That's what I love. I have never moved out of Pittsburgh. And
yeah,
when I was earlier in my career, I thought, what am I going to do in Pittsburgh? Like how much of a career can I have in Pittsburgh? And I have
Yeah,
had an amazing career and I have never left the city. So that's pretty exciting.
super exciting. Um, Don, is there a defining moment, like something that made you realize cyber was where you wanted to be? Obviously, I think the way you explained it says it all. But was it getting that opportunity to work with the Secret Service on the Olympics that really was like, okay, I'm never turning back. Like this is like where I want to, take my career. Amen.
I I realized I wanted to get into security a little before that. I was working on a project at Carnegie Mellon, and it
Okay.
was a prototype of a portal for emergency response in case of a bioterrorism attack. So
Oh
that
wow.
show like how ahead of things our government was. Like here we were pre 9/11 working on
Sure.
a portal for collaboration in case of a bioterrorism attack. And this was back in the late 90s. So back then, like the internet wasn't what it is now. There were no like phones where you could just do videos and post them
Exactly.
to the
Right.
world. And so we created this portal, and that was for, imagine a bioterrorism attack. You'd have to have the FBI, the NSA, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, local departments of health. Um, they talked about like getting your grocery store records of what kind of drugs are people getting so they could see how it's spreading. It was
Wow.
really, really cool, very
That's
cool.
really interesting.
But
Amen.
I realized like we're doing this portal, but no one has ever mentioned security. And it seems to me that this was early, this was in the late 90s, but still, there were viruses and
Yeah, and
were
if a system like that is like totally exposed, I mean, that could be very damaging.
right. And so that wasn't even mentioned. And I thought, I'd kind of like to learn about security. And so I think I'll try to get a job in CERT. And so that's what piqued my interest. And it also kind of introduced me to that. Well, the Dragos mission is safeguarding civilization. And
Yeah, love that. Yep.
mother always said, Dawn just wants to save the world. Ever since I got a job in search, she used to always say that Dawn just wants to save the world. And that's what awakened that love of cybersecurity in me.
Well, and Don, I'm so glad you brought that point up because it's something I've been talking about a lot in these conversations. I think some of the best cyber leaders that I've talked to in my career, amen, and cyber professionals, I'll say in general, have that mindset of like they want to make a difference in this world.
Yes,
And maybe becoming a doctor, who is like saving lives on a daily basis. This is the closest we could come to it with our God-given abilities, right?
exactly.
And
Yes.
yeah, and there's nothing else out there that gives you that feeling of like, okay, we are like on the front edge of being that line between seriously terrible stuff and how civilization like operates in order, right?
Yeah, yeah. I always say when I interviewed, I don't hire anymore, but when I used to interview people, the number one thing I would look for was passion. If
Yeah,
they could answer all the questions right and they had the technical ability, but they had no passion, like why do you want this job?
yeah,
If passion didn't come through, then forget it. You're not the person to work for Dawn Cappelli.
yep. Amen. I love that. So Don, I'm going to ask you a question. You've managed teams and you've had teams, you've hired teams, great teams. And how would you make sure, if you're hiring folks that are like you, they're in it because they're passionate, they believe in the mission of what you're doing. How do you keep them from
Amen.
charging too hard and burning themselves out and, you know, wanting to do too much? There's never a shortage of things to do in this field. You
Yeah.
you could literally run yourself ragged if you're not careful. What are some good strategies in order to mitigate that sort of thing? Amen.
Number one strategy, I became aware of it pretty early on as a manager because I was a working mother and I would work till 5, I'd turn everything off, and then I would spend the night with my kids. And after they went to bed, I would go back to work, and sometimes until 1 or 2 in the morning.
Sure.
And I would be emailing that whole time, you know? And so then I started hearing people say, yeah, we know we better be ready at like 11 o'clock. That's when Dawn's emails start coming in. I thought, what?
You realize that had an impact on other people. Yep.
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, this way they can see it in the morning when they come to work. But
Right.
when I realized because of me, they feel like they have to get on their computers at 11 at night. I
Right.
thought, oh, I've got to stop this. So that's when I started drafting the emails. Keep them in the drafts folder, but don't send them until the morning. And the same with weekends. Like if I worked on the weekend, I started getting responses and I thought, wait a second. I'm not doing this because I expect them to be working. I just
Yeah.
want to feel like I'm getting caught up. But I always felt like I have to control myself because
Yep.
I am a workaholic. They're going to feel like that's what I expect. No matter what I say, that's what they're going to think I expect them to be.
Well, disclaimer for any of my colleagues or friends out there watching this. I am sorry if I do that to you because I do that a lot. That's my habit too. I like to hang out with the kids, and once they're off the bed, I'm usually back in the lab doing my thing. So, but I hope most people that I work with know that I'm only doing that because that's my time to be productive, and I don't expect them to be productive during that time. But that's very cool that you recognized that and did something about that. And I'm gonna definitely have to take a page out of your book with that. Uh, so Don, let me ask you, I know with you running the OT CERT and you being at Dragos and Echelon is a partner of Dragos. We love working with Dragos and in the mission there. Think Rob's fantastic. Um, love to hear from you, your perspective on what you see as overhyped or underhyped in the security field today. There's lots of hype around obvious things right now, like AI. Um, but I, I feel like your perspective might be different, being on the sort of OT side of things and that edge. So very curious to hear what you think's overhyped versus underhyped at this stage.
The
Amen.
hype on AI worries me. It is amazing. AI is amazing. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I feel like people have jumped ahead on the AI bandwagon and they haven't realized that they still haven't done the basics because what we keep seeing is basic cyber hygiene. And I remember when I was a CISO, early in my CISO career, I used to hear that about IT.
Sure.
Just make sure you have the basics down. And so I really did focus on that. I want to make sure I get the basics right before we start getting to more sophisticated things. And in OT, I feel like the community as a whole, yeah, every time I do some kind of an interview, it's well, what do you think about AI in OT? And I just keep saying, just don't worry about AI until you get the basics down, the 5 critical controls from SANS. And what's interesting is in OT CERT, a few months ago, I took a look at what are people accessing in our portal. I can't see who accesses what, but I can see how many downloads of our different
Yep.
courses.
Sure.
And the top 10 is basic cyber hygiene stuff. It's like create an OT cyber incident response plan, do a tabletop exercise, ransomware hits OT. What do you do? Just the foundational things, log. How do you do logging? USB, like removable media. How do you control removable media in your plants? So I'm really excited to see. And the thing is, although OT CERT was intended to help small and medium organizations, over half of our members are over $1 billion in revenue. So we have a lot of large companies that are using that portal.
That's
And
great.
I see like large and small alike. That's what people are using. So that makes me happy that people are taking that message to heart and worrying about the basics.
ICS incident response, defensible architecture, ICS network visibility monitoring with Dragos, uh, secure remote access, and risk-based vulnerability management, right?
Right. Those are
Do
the
the
five critical controls.
do the
And
basics well, do these fundamentals well,
yeah,
and you're
I,
you're ahead of most of everybody.
you look at where the attack's coming from. A lot of people think the attacks in OT come through IT. So ransomware hits IT and then it impacts OT because you don't have your network segmented. But there's a lot of attacks coming in directly through your remote access that you think is secure, but it's
Right.
not. Or unpatched firewalls, unpatched VPNs. These are the basics. And the basic, you can't just go out and patch everything in OT like you can in IT. But when you have a vulnerability in your firewalls or in your VPNs and it's being actively exploited, you really need to patch that. Like that's the
Amen.
basics.
Oh, um, I also love the Sands has their like I think it's Sands. They have their OT. Or no, that's a CISO thing. Um, their OT vulnerabilities that they put out regularly, right? Calling out critical vulnerabilities in a lot of these ICS systems. Um,
Yeah, that puts those out.
yep,
Um, and like Dragos, we do disclosures, responsible disclosures of vulnerabilities ourselves. But yeah, CISA puts out vulnerability disclosures. And so, yeah, there is kind of a one-stop shop that you can go to.
yeah, and like just staying ahead on that and being very responsive to that for a lot of OT teams, I think this is super critical. I think there will be a lot of value, with AI, but I don't think I want like this open claw or Claude bot accessing my OT environments anytime soon, right?
No, no, no. You really don't want to just let AI loose. I remember a few years ago there was a vendor that I heard talking, and they said, and then the AI will take over and defend your OT network. And I just sat there and thought, oh, please don't buy that product.
Yeah, that doesn't, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Don't want to unleash the AI. Like at Dragos, we're looking at how can we use AI. We have real data that we've collected for all these years. And so
Yes,
we can create AI, like an AI assist. What
correct.
should I do when I see something like this based on what
Yep.
happened in the past?
And here are some suggestions, and then the human could take it the last mile, right?
But don't just let the AI start taking action. Not no.
Amen. Amen. Not on our OT systems anytime soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, So I often see younger pros coming up in the industry. They want to be a CISO, right? That's what they aspire to do. But I often feel like there's lots of misconceptions that younger cyber professionals have about what does it take to be a CISO, right? What other skills, are they missing? What do you think is maybe one of those biggest misconceptions that those younger professionals have?
I mentor some young professionals that have that exact goal. I want to be a CISO. Help me create that career path.
Yep,
And their impression is like they need to have technical skills. They need to work in the SOC. They need to be a network administrator. They need to understand all of the technical components. But what they don't understand is you really have to understand the business itself. And you need to be able to talk to the CEO, your senior vice presidents. You need to be able to talk to them. And they don't want to hear your technical mumbo jumbo. You need to be able to communicate with them very clearly. And I feel like I'm not a deeply technical security person. I've always surrounded myself with really good technical people, But my skill has always been more to kind of see the big picture and to be able to take a standard and apply that and come up with a way of identifying risk. Um, so many people, like I read the news feeds. I would read the news feeds every morning as CISO. And everything I'd read, I'd think, could this happen to us? Could this happen to us? And usually I would say, no, we're okay. But when there was something that I wasn't sure about, I'd send it to the right people at Rockwell. And then you had to make your risk-based decision. Is this one that I need to like escalate, or do we put it on the list? Like just
Right.
manage risk is is a very different skill than just understanding technology.
It totally is. Yeah. Brings together the impact to the business. It brings together the probability, based on everything else you've got going on within that business and who's potentially coming after you, right? That's a big context, loop that a lot of people don't even think of. They think, okay, there's this standard. I've got to follow the standard. Well, yeah, the standard's like a great starting point, but based off of like your threat profile with your industry and your company, like you have to think in those terms and you have to
Right.
talk in those terms too.
Right.
Um, that is a constant theme I'm hearing from a lot of folks that have been in your chair, Dawn, is that really getting sharp on what does the business need and require, and to talk in those business terms is critically important. So,
And I think another piece of advice I give to people is authenticity. I think that was the single key to my success at Rockwell
yeah,
because they trusted me. The CEO trusted me. The board trusted me. They knew when I said something that I could temper. I knew when something was serious and when something wasn't. And when Dawn said something is serious, we need to listen because she doesn't do that like all the time.
yeah,
Just being passionate, you want to just jump up and down and react to everything. And as a CISO, you have to really control your emotions
oh yeah,
and choose when to react and when not to.
amen, amen. Um, Dawn, if you could put a message on a billboard that every new CISO had to read and drive by once a day, what would it say and why?
It would be that be authentic.
Love
You
that.
can deviate from that. If ever one, I felt like if one time I was not authentic about something, or what
Amen.
was hard was
Yeah.
sometimes you would be getting pressure like I don't think you have to raise that up the ladder. They're not going to take that well. It's going to cost too much. I get it's a big risk, but I don't really think you want to be the one to bring that up. And it took a lot of nerve sometimes to bring it up. I
Yeah.
remember the one year we were preparing for the annual board meeting where we would present our strategy for the year. And I had a cross-functional group that we all got together and we met once a month. So we knew here are our biggest risks. Here's how much we need to mitigate it. And so for one of them, I had to go to the SVP of the development team, all the software engineers at Rockwell. They all were in one big product team.
Yeah.
And I said, I need X number of dollars. And it was a lot for this new initiative because this is one of our top five, I think, risks in the company. And he said, Dawn, I get it. But we just had a riff. We had to lay people off. Like earnings are down. We don't have money right now. I just can't give it to you. And I said, I believe me, I totally understand, but it's still a risk, whether we can mitigate it or not. It's still a risk, and I have to raise it to the board. And so I'm going to put it on in the slides. I'm going to put it on the deck. Um, so it's going on the deck. And I sent him the deck and I said, there it is on slide 5. There it is. It's on there. And so I kept going to him like every couple of days saying, you know, it's in the deck. The deck is due Friday. It's in the deck. It's going to the board. And I knew he didn't want it to go to the board. Nobody wants to be that one of those top risks and then say, oh, we're doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
So finally, it was like we're playing a game of chicken. Like, who's
Right.
going to give
He's
first?
a budge first. Yeah.
It was really hard for me to stand my ground and not to give in. And
Yeah.
finally, the day before the slides were due, he said, tell you what, you can't use all that money at once anyway. How about if I give you half? You do what you need to do, get started, do product evaluations and all that. And then in 6 months, hopefully earnings will be better and I can give you the other half. And I said, perfect solution.
Yeah.
So our
It's
plan and
great.
everything was fine, but it took a lot of guts. And it was,
That's that authenticity, right? That's you staying true to yourself, true to your beliefs, and true to what you think is best. Amen. And look, I mean, you also gave them the ability to say, we just can't fund that right now, but thank you for sharing that risk. Um, but there's no way you would have lived with not raising it and sweeping it under the rug. That's not you. And that was your way of being authentic to yourself and sticking to your beliefs. So I think that's great advice.
yeah, and that's one fear I have being retired. You know, a lot of retired CISOs want to be on boards.
Sure.
And that's one fear I have of being on a board because you are totally reliant on what you're told. And
Yes.
I know there are a lot of people out there that are not authentic.
Yes. They'll
And
tell you what you want to hear. Yeah.
yeah, they can be beat down and they will give it.
Acquiesce.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that to me, that's the most important quality of a CISO or anyone really, anyone in
Yeah, totally.
security.
That's good in life and CISO world. Um, well, getting close to wrapping up here, and just wanted to ask kind of last question for you, Don. I guarantee, based on your story, you've obviously met and worked with so many talented leaders in the space. Is there one CISO or cyber leader out there that you would like to call out or thank or, show some, uh, gratitude for? Amen.
It's definitely Rob Lee. I mean, he's the CEO of Dragos,
Yep.
and um, I've seen him speak for so many years, and that's really what has driven me. And he's just amazing. He's unbelievably amazing.
He's a powerhouse in this industry. Absolutely.
In building the company he has and in maintaining his authenticity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. We're lucky to have him. Society in general is lucky to have him.
Dragos and yes, everybody else involved that relies on the critical infrastructure that you help protect is lucky to have him as a leader of that company, no doubt. Um, well, Don, this has been fantastic. I wish we had hours and hours more uh, to chat more. You're always full of great advice. I always learn something from you every time we're together. And I always look forward to our interactions. So really want to say thank you so much for just being part of this.
Thank
Amen.
you for giving me the opportunity. It was fun, and I hope it helps some people with something.
I I believe it will, undoubtedly. So thank you so much.
Thank
Amen.
you.
Amen.